Thank you so much for joining us. What is your base case scenario of what happens in Brexit?
Well, I don't believe that we're going to see a deal by the 21st of November. I think in terms of Dominic Raab's prediction, that was already being backtracked. You know, we're less than 150 days from Brexit, and there is still huge uncertainty about what we're going to have as the final deal. Huge uncertainty, almost more importantly, about what's going to be in the political declaration, which is the forerunner to the future trade agreement that we will have in the future framework with the European Union. And even of more significance as well to members of Parliament, what kind of parliamentary process we're going to have, what meaningful vote there's going to be. And if our evidence to the Select Committee yesterday is anything to go by, this is more of a meaningless vote than a meaningful vote, with huge consequences for scrutiny and accountability of the government.
Right. Exactly what are you telling me? That we'll have an agreement and will banks have access? Are we staying in the common market for now, or what will a deal look like?
Well, we don't know what the deal will look like. I think in terms of transition, we will be staying within much of the framework that we already have, but we will be rule takers rather than be seated around the table and having a say in what happens. People are very concerned about what this could mean if there is no deal as well for the UK. There is no guarantee there's going to be a deal that gets through Parliament. That could mean real challenges in terms of difficulties with trade, delays at the border, questions about whether even basics like the European health insurance card would be available to citizens, legal certainty around contracts. I mean, this uncertainty is not what people voted for, and it's incredibly concerning that we may have two cliff edges as well facing us, one at the end of March and then the second one at the end of our transition period as well. So the government has a lot to do in a very short space of time, both to get a deal, to have a deal that's going to win the confidence of Parliament, and then to have us be ready for leaving on March the 29th. There are huge questions as well about whether we will be ready in terms of having passed the legislation that's needed, with over 800 statutory instruments still set to go through. So we've got a lot of work to do yet.
So what does it mean for the Labour Party? Will they push for a second referendum if it's not the right kind of deal? Do you want elections if it's not the right kind of deal?
Well, there are increasing calls for a second referendum, and for the very simple reason that what's emerging and what the Prime Minister has been is now doing in terms of being forced into a very difficult position is not what people thought was going to happen as a result of Brexit. There is no way in which we are heading to be a more prosperous nation. In fact, every scenario under the government's own Brexit impact assessments suggested that we would be worse off. Under some scenarios, we'd be less worse off than others. So 2% less growth over 15 years if we stay within the European Economic Area. So the reason why there's calls for a second referendum is because people are saying if what is now on offer isn't what people voted for, surely they should have a chance to express a point of view when it comes to the final deal, and particularly if that deal doesn't go through Parliament. The Labour Party has said that if there is no deal that's agreed by Parliament, and if there is no general election, which would be our preference, so that we can have a different negotiating team that's really putting the economy first and not party interest first, which is what Theresa May has now become known for, then should the people have another say? But there is going to be an important question about what they have a say about. And there are increasing calls as well from some in Parliament to say, look, if there is no end state and we are going to leave, then it's better to leave with being a member potentially of something like the European Economic Area with some of the benefits that go with that, rather than leave with no deal, which would be catastrophic for our country and our economy.
Seema, it's wonderful to speak to you, and I think I can speak for a global audience that finds the Labour Party of the United Kingdom an absolute mystery. You've provided leadership to the Fabian Society for years, and whether it's Bernard Shaw or it's Harold Lasky or maybe even Ed Ball's 1992, everybody wants to know how Labour gets back to what it used to be. Could Labour go back to the nostalgia of the Fabian Society, or does Labour have to find a new way?
Well, there's one guarantee in politics, which is the past is never a determinant of the future. And what you've got to do is always be reinventing yourself to have your values in line with where a modern situation seeks political solutions. And if you take the budget this week as one example and how Labour's responded, what we've seen is, I would quote it as less of the same, but certainly the same coming from the Tory government with a sense of a failed economic plan. They failed on every one of their own targets.
Okay, I get
so
that,
but the Labour Party, it's yes, you're absolutely right. But for the Labour Party, it is about having an economic policy that's going to respond to the challenges that.
Can Mr. Corbyn provide that? This is critical because Jeremy Corbyn is miles from the Fabian Society. How do you get back to the values of another time and place?
Well, you know, the Fabian Society is one of many voices. The Fabian Society was one of the founders of the Labour Party, just as the unions were, and the Cooperative Party was also very influential at that time. And, you know, what you have in the Labour family is a wide range of views, but set around common values where we do believe in fairness and equality and in all of us playing our part for society as a whole. And, you know, when we look at the budget this week, I'll take that as an indicator of where the Tory policy is now going. They saw that they had failed in terms of their previous economic plans and strategy. They didn't tell you that. They pretended that there was going to be some sort of change, potentially an end to austerity. But what they haven't got is a plan for investment in our country. This was a budget that bought off some of their backbenchers and did enough just to get by for the next 6 months. If you make this point, we won seats in the general election last year, and when I'm going around the country now, I'm seeing people increasingly dissatisfied with the Tories.
Okay.
Not only do they not have a plan for Brexit, they don't have a plan for the country.
Then here's the key question, Seema. That's absolutely correct. But the key question is, who do they go to if they don't go to the Tories? As an MP of the Labour Party, does the Labour Party need a new cogent view with the nostalgia of your Fabian Society and onto something new? I mean, I don't see a cogent Labour voice in this Brexit debate.
I don't know if it's about sort of romanticising the past, because it was very different at that time. I do think it is about saying, what are our solutions for the present? You know, we founded the National Health Service. We brought in the minimum wage. We invested in early years. We saw huge growth across our country and an increase in equality between our regions as well. We've seen inequality rise hugely. We've seen child poverty rise significantly under the Conservatives. I see it in my own constituency. People want to know that they've got access to good jobs. They want to know they've got investment in education. They want good prospects for their children. This is the first generation where children are set to do worse than their parents. Now, those are the things: home ownership, or a secure place to live, decent education. And that's where the Labour Party's answers are what people are now responding to very, very strongly.
Are you frustrated that many people and probably many voters still don't 100% know where Labour stands on Brexit?
Sorry, I couldn't hear your question fully. Am I frustrated with...
The question is, are you frustrated that the voters don't understand where Labour is on Brexit?
I do think we've got to be clearer about that. You know, we had a big debate at party conference, which was just last month. And in that, we moved the position of the party in favour of a second referendum as well, under the circumstances where there isn't a deal that's agreed by Parliament and also where there isn't a general election. Now, I have called since the week after the referendum, in fact, that, you know, from my personal point of view, thinking about the economy and what I think is right for our country, we should be seeking to stay in the single market as far as possible. I do think that we need to have greater controls over freedom of movement, and that's something which the EU can deliver if it chooses to. There is no legal reason why it couldn't. It's a political reason. And I do believe that we need to stay within a customs union, or the customs union, so that we have that security for Northern Ireland as well, and Ireland. Now, the reason why Ireland is such an issue is because the border in Northern Ireland won't just be a border between the Republic and and Northern Ireland. It will be a border between the European Union and a third country. That is fundamentally different. And we have to accept a responsibility in that and say, well, look, if we don't want this to have a negative impact on the economy and the free flow of trade and goods and supplies between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, we have to say what's a solution for the UK as a whole. And that's why I do think that the customs union has got to be a big part of that.
We must leave it there. Seema Malhotra, Member of Parliament for the Labour, spirited discussion on the future of the Labour Party as well. Thank you so much this morning.